video. All right. Is the tape?
Yeah.
All right, good. All right, so that would be this 2 or 3 dimensional time, multi-dimensional time, and I've looked online for what a universe like that would be like. I was wondering if anyone else had even thought of that. Other people have thought of it, but nobody knows what it would be like because, like I said, we don't really have anything to base it off of. 4 dimensions, we can use like analogies to help us out and visualize these things and get an understanding, but with time we don't. If we were 2 or 3 time dimensional, if we had like 3 dimensions of time or 2 dimensions of time, it probably wouldn't be as hard to imagine more dimensions of time. It'd be tricky, just like step up from 3 to 4 dimensions, but it would be doable. Whereas right now, it could be doable, but we haven't been able to do it yet, so it's either impossible or much, much harder than if we had more than one to begin with. And like the line land, like imagine that, it's just like multi-dimensional time. So you could have like 3 plus 2 dimensional time, 3 plus 3 dimensional time, 4 plus 2 dimensional time. What about negative dimensions of time? That doesn't really make sense either, but again, back to negative spatial dimensions. And so, like, one reason we might not be able to figure out multi-dimensional time is because the laws of physics we know of, we all have this based around 1 dimension of time, everything. Just like a line lander, they would probably make their laws of physics, but they'd probably make assumptions based on 1-dimensional space. They'd probably make some really silly assumptions, right? That would seem silly to us, but that would be plain wrong. But in 1-dimensional space, these assumptions would hold true. Just like our assumptions of what physics is like only have 1-dimensional time. Time is 1-dimensional as we see it. So we assume everything based on 1 dimension of time. So physics is probably incomplete. In fact, just like string theory says there's more dimensions of space, maybe the way to unify quantum mechanics and general relativity would be to have multiple dimensions of time that are curled up, or that our universe is a part of a greater structure of. That would make it make sense because our laws of physics, as we have them, may be incomplete because they're all assumed based on 1 dimension of time. And it's not really anybody's fault because, well, we can't really understand more than 1 dimension of time. So, like, you can't really blame anyone for that either. Everyone's doing their best.
I think people are wanting to know how much is left.
Yeah, it's like almost done. It's almost done. I was like just about done, like a couple minutes left. Yeah. All right. So, yeah. So I have a couple recommendations to make. The book Flatland. I'll type the name up here. It's like about this 2-dimensional world, and it's really interesting. It goes into very deep detail about these two-dimensional world and the lives of the people on it, and it's really interesting. And they have like an oppressive government that, anyway, you should read it. And then there's 4D Toys, which is the app I showed you of it. It's on iOS. It's also on Steam. It's cheaper on iOS. I think it's like $7, $8, or $9 on iOS, and it's worth the money. It costs a lot of money, but trust me, it's worth it. You get so much out of it, but you have to be patient with it because it takes a while to get, and you can play with that for hours and keep learning. And I have a couple more ideas. 4-dimensional buildings. So overpopulation is a problem, right? And space travel is also tricky because, well, you have to leave Earth. It's doable, but it uses resources. So what if there was, like, space travel is definitely the future, but what if there was another way to have more space? Alright, so how about instead of, like, escaping Earth's gravity, what if you've got the 3D hyperplane, what if you just have a building that is anchored in the 3D hyperplane, and there are other parts in these other dimensions, alright? So these hyperplanes, you'd have an elevator that goes from one section to another, and they would all be kind of parallel to each other. So imagine, like, flatland analogy of this would be like a building here, and there would be an elevator that would carry them up over here. There'd be different levels here. There would be the main world here, and there'd be all these different levels, so to speak, like floors. So there'd be, like, for us, be like these meta floors. It'd be a 4-dimensional building. You could have 5D, 6D building, infinite dimensional building, and it would just be really nice. A lot of space, as much space as you want. And the anchor could be, like, really small, so that'd be really useful. Of course, the most challenging thing would be propelling the elevators in those dimensions. Final thing is 0D. So what about 0D aspects? So we have 3D space, so we can interpret 4D and 5D and stuff, and think about that because we have analogies to go on. One dimension of time. We know that time is one-dimensional. That's a dimensional figure. That's a number. That's a number that we have. We know what time is. We don't know what two-dimensional time would be like, but we know what time is itself. What about something you have 0 dimensions of? A point with 0 dimensions of space would have no idea of space, of traveling and movement. A universe without time would have no idea of change. They wouldn't know what time would be. They'd have 0 dimensions of time, or you'd have 0 dimensions of space. It would be really weird. What if our universe has a property like time and space that is so fundamental that we have 0 dimensions of, just like that, but we have 0 of? So a universe with dimensions of that, they would be able to understand it, but we don't have any of it, so our universe is like a point in that aspect. It wouldn't be time or space, it would be something completely different, just as fundamental, but completely different, and there could be an infinite amount of these things that we just don't have. So that's probably the most interesting thing to think about, just how much could be possible that we really don't know anything about. Alright, so that's, I hope you found that all interesting, all that stuff, 4 dimensions and everything. I'm just relieved this, like, there were a lot of technical difficulties, but at least it kind of worked, so thank you so much for being patient all the way through. I'm actually really impressed with how, like, everybody seemed to understand it pretty well, so that was really good, and I think...
Ask if there's any questions.
Oh yeah, so are there any questions? So ask for me. In the chat, you can put in your questions. Happy to answer them if anyone has any.
If no one has a question, I have one.
Alright, what's your question?
So my question is, how does the 4-dimensional theory explain the universe expanding, or inflation theory?
Oh, so inflation.
But if someone else sends a question, you can do theirs.
Yeah, right. Alright. Oh, thank you, Teresa. Thanks, Kirsty. Alright. Alright, so yeah, so the universe expanding. The idea is you can imagine a sphere expanding. So imagine you have a point and you have a sphere and it grows bigger and bigger and bigger. And there would be the surface of that sphere would grow bigger and the universe would be expanding. So everything on it would stay the same. So you could imagine a balloon, you could like have a balloon, you could blow it up, and you could draw like galaxies on it, you can try this yourself. And like stuff on it, and you blow it up, and the distance in between each thing on the surface increases. And that'd be the same for our universe, except it would be 1 dimension more, so it would be a 4-dimensional sphere and a 1-dimensional universe. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Alright, so thank you so much for listening to this, and I'm really glad that I had this opportunity to present to all of you guys. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rishi.
Thank you. Okay, bye.